So basically today we are talking about a unique method. Why I say unique is because it has evolved through experience, it has evolved through struggle for justice, for empowerment, and once it reached its kind of level of maturity, it spread all over the country, that is India. And it has affected the lives of millions of women living in poverty. The whole process has been a long journey, and we are trying to put it in 30 minutes here. So it'll be a mixture of a lot of visuals. And at the end, we would like to have a discussion on some ideas that we have to move forward. Because the journey is not just about empowerment. Once we started training people, once we started building capacity of multiple stakeholders, government officers, NGOs, bank managers, international scholars, initially from India, but for the last 15 years from many countries across the world. We found that sharing of certain ideas is feasible only when we are also able to share consciousness. And this is something that we experimented with in our residential retreat programs. So we were having people coming from different parts of India and later different parts of the world to Lucknow to live with us for about a week or sometimes for a month. And we would have these early morning sessions which would be very open, and where we would describe what is it, about our life. Why are we so excited about what we are doing? And gradually, over a period of time, when we started sharing our perspectives, people came up with their ideas, and over almost 2 decades, we summarized those ideas into key, points which we call conscious living. How do we, organize our lives, daily lives, through which we can improve ourselves towards more joy and peace, and also enable others to move towards more joy and peace. And we called it steps in conscious living. So basically, the evolution of ideas here in India towards empowerment and self-help of very poor populations was going on in parallel with evolution of methods of conscious living. Now, these are two quite distinct things, but actually from our standpoint, they are not distinct, because that is what makes the process of transformation effective and as well sustainable, which are so important for transformation of any kind. So I've therefore made this presentation having built around both these points about the process of empowerment and about consciousness building. Okay, next slide. Nada?
Hello, just a second.
Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So basically, the presentation is divided into 3 parts, where in the first part, we are simply describing, the institution, the kind of engagements that we've had over the last 3 decades. And the second part is about the key learning. What is it that we distilled from this experience, which now we feel is for benefit of whole of mankind and needs to be spread widely. Essentially also because after we went through this experience, I have been sharing it with the youth from some elite engineering colleges in India and other universities. And when I shared with them, they are all extremely excited, and they feel that this is something very important for their lives, and we should try and spread the message across everywhere. So that is the excitement about it. The young people getting motivated to rethink about their lives, their perspective, and so on, towards conscious living. We'll describe what it means. And so we have tried to combine this presentation into methods of empowerment and steps in conscious living. And finally, the third thing is we try to look forward how we can spread these messages, which are really coming in an amazing form from various stakeholders. So these are the 3 let's say, parts of this presentation. Next slide, please. Basically, Manavodaya is recognized as the pioneer of the self-help group process, which has been widely adopted in rural India, leading to empowerment of several million women. And we are a very small institution, but how did it lead to such a widespread, and then later on to large number of professionals in different countries? These included countries in South Asia, in Africa, in Europe, and how it led to evolution of these methods of conscious living, which also is now giving beautiful results when we connect to the youth. So this presentation tries to summarize these key learnings and to look forward on how we can spread it further. Next slide, please. Today we're not going to describe the self-help groups. It's a very well-established thing. You just Google and you'll find everything. But as we were known as the pioneers, we founded the concept almost 30 years back, more than 30 years back. But gradually it spread, first of all, to local areas, and then when the government took over, and then with the help of a large number of NGOs, government, bank officers, it has spread all over the country. But the initial phase where we were, the pioneers, we were trying to do all, trying to experiment with different ways in which it works successfully. And that's when it's gradually spread. So these are some, you can see some scenes of that early period when we were trying to move forward with self-help groups in different parts of North India. Next slide, please. The impact of these groups has been amazing. It has not only led to economic and social empowerment, it has helped build their collective decision-making capacity, building leadership, and the idea of working towards justice. And as Neeraj is saying, they are a major force to achieve the goal of universal financial inclusion. You're right, Neeraj, very, very right. Because it builds financial discipline. And not only that, it leads to a sense of empowerment through which it leads to good governance at village level. It has so many benefits. Next slide, please. We'll give you a just a glimpse of what these residential programs have been at Lucknow, because there are many people who still want to come in and understand what is going on. So we are giving a quick glimpse here of these residential programs, which have been going on for last 20 years. The key thing is the concept of training. Training is not information sharing. Training is about a process of reflection and action. It is a process of interactive, let's say, exchange. It's a process of visiting people in the field and a lot of reflection together. And we have been doing this for last 25 years. Government officers, NGOs, next slide. Bank managers, look at this. I'm sitting in the center. I'm quite a young guy, that was almost 20, 25 years back. Now I'm 25 years plus. So it has been going on for a long time. Vanda, you are laughing. Okay, next slide, please. Vanda has been with us. You were with us for almost 3 months. So how long were you with us?
Actually, around 6 months.
Yeah, Vanda is from Sri Lanka. He's doing wonderful work in Sri Lanka now. So we also had this science and technology groups, because our concept was that if we are taking science and technology to people, unless the people are organized into groups, unless their roles and responsibilities are clear, science and technology doesn't really help. It is something imposed on them. The needs have to come from people. The science and technology has to match the resources of people. The people have to take collective decisions. When all that framework is not there, technology really does not have a role. So we have been training science and technology professionals in how best to make technology adopted to the needs of people. And these are scientists who have come from different parts of India. And we are having this session in Lucknow here about how do we move forward when we start connecting to people. Next slide, please. Since about 1999, so that's almost about 25 years, we have been getting people from different parts of the world. Here, this is a group from Norway, which had come for learning. And so there'll be many slides on this. Next slide, please. You see, they are all, our programs are usually built together with learning of this kind. There's a lot of cultural exchange, which means many things. Yoga, local cuisine, learning that, local arts and culture, and so on. So most of the girls, when they come here, they also learn how to wear saris. Next slide, please. We have also been conducting a one-year diploma course. The whole idea is that current education has not really tried to catch what is happening on ground in the latest context. Also, one of the problems is that many of the textbooks are were designed long back. They have not incorporated real stuff happening on ground now in the last 5 to 10 years. So it is very important that these concepts, which have been successful, which have been affecting the lives of people, are put into education. The young people learn about it and they start practicing on ground. Unfortunately, despite the fact that this has happened in India and it has been there for almost 20 years, it has not yet entered into the education system. Of course, it has not entered into the education system in the West either, nowhere. And I strongly believe that these concepts are quite fundamental. How do we enable and empower? How do we, make things happen from the perspective of people? This is a fundamental shift that has to come in our understanding of development and change, and which is not happening. Unfortunately, it is not happening. We are still being guided by people sitting in Harvard or sitting in where and they do their calculations, I don't know what, but nothing comes from ground. We have to see how we can take things from ground, move from practice to theory. It is very important that we do it. And that's why I appeal to people here. Let's find ways in which we start connecting to universities, to higher educational institutions, and enable them to go through this, understand this from a practical perspective, not just a very bookish knowledge, because this is all real. This is all what happens on ground. So we started this diploma course, a one-year diploma course, and students, they came and learned, but then, this entering the education system has to be much more planned, much more, let us say systematic. So we have not been able to do that, but now we have several years of experience of trying to run an education program also, which needs to be strengthened considerably, not just at our place, but in other countries also. Next slide, please. So this is another aspect. We have been conducting programs in many parts of the other parts of the world. Next slide. One of these programs was if you know the place called Tigray. Tigray was having a civil war. I think it's still having a civil war. But when we went there, the civil war was silent for some time, and all these women that you see were having guns in their hands, fighting for independence. But then that whole territory is so poor, very poor. There, it's almost nothing. Unbelievable. So once it's in the middle of civil war, when they all came to learn what can they do. So these women were there. We were there far away north of Ethiopia called Mekele, and by the end of 1 week, we were all crying. And look at this thought from one of the women who attended. She says, her name is Muruts, that people in our area thought that they will live poor forever. Now we know that this is not true. I can see the difference in my knowledge after coming here. The real concept of self-help groups is looking inward. This is something that needs to be explained. It needs to cut across. It's not about a process of knowledge sharing, which is based on just giving lectures. It's about real ways in which we enable and empower others. It cannot be done through lectures. It has to be based on reflection action. And that reflection action can only be done by people who have actually practiced it. So we need a different paradigm for education itself. And this is what I want to propose today, that let us work towards a new paradigm of education also. Next, please. There's another region in Ethiopia. It's called Afar. If some of you know that, before the advent of the modern man, there was this half man kind of a person who was living in Afar. So in Afar, there's a museum there which shows how man evolved. But this region in particular, now that there are centuries, or let us say thousands of years have crossed that stage, it's absolutely like a desert. So we were there in that desert, and these are pastoralists. They move on camels and set up a small tent. Anyway, we were there again to share that how they too, in their most difficult living circumstances, how through self-help, they can actually change their lives completely, socially, economically, even politically. And they were so happy. But unfortunately, after we went there, this was 2009, people in the government, people in donor agencies, although they did not pick up the ideas, and people there were so sad that somebody has to support a process of training and supporting facilitators of change who go by this method. If no one supports them, somebody who starts working needs to be supported somewhere. But with that not coming in, I think the program has not made the right impact in such regions. Next slide. This is another program which happened much later, about before the COVID. This was Kenya, the region called Wamunyu. Again, these are women leaders from that area. We were there for a week, and we really enjoyed because they were very hardworking women. But again, the African problem in Kenya is quite different from Ethiopia, because Kenya is a more developed society. But unfortunately, the problems are same. Women are, oppressed. Women are having all kinds of very deep problems, which is not known to people, beyond their village. Also, sometimes the living process is very, very, it's painful, and therefore the need to empower them. That is the only way out. And self-help is a method of empowerment. We are not going through this process here because today's seminar is not about self-help, but I'm just trying to tell the story that how such a method can be of use to people everywhere in the world. Next. Again, I must say that you see here sitting behind, but then next to it is my wife, Amla. She has a doctorate in chemistry, but early when I also abandoned my corporate career, I was in my 20s. She also abandoned her academic career, and we together, almost like idiots, have been working among the rural poor. Now it's almost 35 years. Most people call us idiots because with our kind of background, nobody would expect us to start working and living and doing things with very poor rural women across the rural countryside. So here she is explaining the concepts to the Kenyan women. Okay, next slide, please. This was another very interesting experience. Nepal, again, is a landlocked country, and in my opinion, really in a very poor economic condition. But the one good thing is that people have high spirits there. There's a strong cooperative movement there, very strong cooperative movement. And there are almost, as I was told, almost about 20,000 cooperatives, big cooperatives. One cooperative having almost 100,000 members. There are 14,000 cooperatives across the state, across the country. So in this particular gathering, these cooperative leaders had come to Kathmandu, and I was invited to speak to them about the method of enabling and empowerment. Beautiful response. I have videos of the whole program. Absolutely fantastic response. People were so glad to understand and know that there are different ways in which people can be empowered very systematically and with clear ways of moving forward. So this is one of the scenes from Nepal, again to show that the methods are universal, they can be adopted everywhere, and they make a huge difference to the lives of people. Next. What is this approach to capacity building? As I mentioned there, it's not about throwing information. It's about reflective discussion. So we start off talking about a theme and enable others to reflect on it. Because we are not just talking about doing something. What we have to do is to enable others. Now, this is a new paradigm. Enabling others first means we have to connect to them. We have to be very humble. We have to be able to communicate in a totally different manner. This is not something which is usually taught. So enabling and empowerment is a different science altogether. And therefore, we need to have interaction. Of course, we need classroom lectures also. But it also needs to be combined with what I call here is integral yoga. Yoga is a practice which is seen as some exercises. But yoga is a science of calming the mind. And one has to learn that. It can be practiced, learned, and adopted, and the whole perspective of life changes. And this is so important for all of us to build a perspective that helps us and helps us to connect with others better. Next slide, please. So this also, of course, it does imply physical exercises also. So whenever people are coming here in Lucknow, there's a lot of physical yoga also, but a lot of integral yoga, which means what are the practices to calm the mind. Next slide, please. Our key learning over these last 3 decades is that transformational change needs focus on both the inner dimension of change and the outer dimension of change. Now, what is this outer dimension of change? I'm calling it systems. And the inner dimension is the consciousness. Now, in a few slides here, I'll try to describe what are systems and what are this consciousness. Next slide, please. In the systems, the key feature, it can be adopted in any context, anywhere in the world. The key feature is that we should enable the people to come together and participate. You see, what happens is when money is thrown by these donors to do something, it is actually thrown in a way because we have not yet taken the perspective of people. We have not connected to them. We have not enabled them to build up their own systems of decision making. So it is important that we build their systems of decision making, which means enabling them to participate equitably. Because there are rich people, poor people, they have their differences. How people resolve their own differences before they come together collectively to take a decision? Then again, that system must be sustainable. There are a huge number of projects all over the world where once the project goes, people come back. It's like going back to the same old state. To make it sustainable, people must own them. They have to find ways in which they can sustain them through their own contributions. So these are challenges which are usually not met even today in the usual rush to meet our targets, because this implies a slower process of enabling and empowering people to take decisions themselves. Of course, this requires innovation. It's not easy because we have to see through, connect to them, have experiments, and innovate to reach a result which is sustainable. And this applies to science, this applies to connecting to people. There will be failures. There will be failures all the time, but we have to persist. Failures, in my opinion, are the steps to success because we learn from failures, build on it, and then move again. So this is the essence of building systems. Now, what are these systems? We'll talk about them. Next slide, please. In our context, we have a whole list of failures. And I can really make a big film out of it. The failures relating to many technologies, many ways in which we started enabling people initially. This was way back in the 80s. But gradually, this is what helped us to evolve the concept of self-help groups. What are the system parameters that we worked on? That what is the vision of people? What is the collective vision? Who decides? Is it a small group of people in a village, or is it the larger body which is also very poor? What rules need to be framed that people can adopt, in the context of their collective work? How do we share the roles and how do they share their roles and responsibilities? These questions are not even asked, believe me, these questions are not even asked in usual projects. How are people setting up their own accounting systems? Are those accounting systems transparent? Some fundamental issues which are not touched upon. What are the various technology options? Now, Again, in many societies, there are very few technology options. But we must make a search of what are the various options. And once we make a search, it is always possible to find make a match between needs, resources, and outcomes. That matchmaking based on technology, based on resources, and then converting it to supply chains so that the stuff is supplied to the market. It is not an easy job at all. But how many of us actually take care to do it? So these are systems. I'm calling these systems. These systems need to be built before we can talk of any meaningful, sustainable, people's own system, intervention. Next, please. In the case of self-help groups, there are more systems. One of them is that the group should be homogeneous. No, if it is not homogeneous, it leads to many problems. I will not describe it here because this is something, there's a full course on how one should move towards self-help groups. We have been teaching this for so many years now, and I still find that groups that are being formed are not homogeneous, and that leads to collapse. There's also another system for sustainability, and which is monthly contributions. And that lead to building of a kitty through which people can sustain the program. Next slide, please. The other systems are cash management. When poor women come together, they must be able to manage their cash properly. Next slide, please. They should be able to manage their accounts properly. And so the cash management and the accounts management system must be in tune with the with the local culture, with the local literacy rates, and so on. In many societies, like in many rural India, women are totally illiterate. So how do we manage cash and accounting systems for them? It will be different in different contexts, but then it must be transparent and must be understood by everyone. Next slide, please. Credit management. In groups, people also give credit to each other. That is what leads to economic enterprises at their level. But credit management is a science. This is credit management by people. It's not credit given by the banks. Credit by the banks comes to the group, but then the group has to give credit to its members. And so this credit management is again a science, and it works beautifully. But again, the systems have to be evolved. They have to be taught to people, and only then that it leads to a proper end use. Next slide. Now, this is the second part of it. We are now talking of, so far we talked about systems. Now we'll talk about the consciousness part. This is a very important statement coming from a very evolved soul called the Mother. She was a French lady. Her name was Mira Alfazar. Now, what she says is, and it's a very important statement for all of us, it's about consciousness. If all the efforts to improve human conditions have miserably failed in the end, in spite of all the ardor and enthusiasm and self-consecration they have inspired at first, it is precisely because the transformation of conditions of human life can only be achieved by another preliminary transformation, which is the transformation of the human consciousness. Now, I find this fundamental, absolutely fundamental, absolutely something that needs to be worked upon in a systematic manner, and which can be done. We have done it, and it can be done, and needs to be done, and needs to be spread widely. People must first understand that this is a need, and which can be done. How do we transform human consciousness? It is a huge science. Some of the Eastern countries, China is losing all its science of consciousness because of the new governments there. But India continues to be on track. Something that started from the Vedas almost 5,000 years back is flowering in this period. Most people from other countries don't even know about it. It's such a flowering science, which is all practical, which needs to be understood, and which leads to huge ramifications for the benefit of mankind. So these are something that we have been trying to distill from the learnings of people from different civilizations, in fact. So I'll be sharing some of that part. Next slide, please. These are the steps in conscious living that have evolved. I'm just sharing them here. There's a full course on this. And it's a beautiful quote. This is what we share with the youth, young people across, in the universities here. There are some 8 steps here, which seems quite, theoretical, but they're all very joyful. And each of them are having, practical aspects. It's not just the theory. It's all full of practice. And these are based on deep reflection that we've been having at our place, Manavodaya, over a period of 20 years. These discussions combined with yoga and meditation led to very deep, kind of concepts that need to be practiced on a daily life. And this is in the current context. The people who came were professionals in their own lives, both internationally and locally. Next slide, please. Now, this is the context. We are picking up thoughts from leaders who are giants in the field of practical philosophy. You can call it spiritual, but many people don't understand spiritual. The whole idea is, how do we move to the core of our heart? How do we actually transform ourselves and others? Now, this is a very famous person. Many of you must have heard the name, Vivekananda. He's been quite famous in the West also. One of his, I actually abandoned my corporate career after reading his biography. Just reading his biography was so powerful that I abandoned my corporate career, a rich, very lovely background, almost 40 years back, and started working in rural India. So there are some of his quotes. Now, what he says is, for example, death is better than a vegetating, ignorant life. So if you're leading a life which is kind of, in his language, vegetating, ignorant. So how do we move towards a better, meaningful, purposeful life? So, and he says, if we don't, why are we living? Even death is better than that. Next slide. We have just picked up such things from many people from different in the Indian culture, but in also many other cultures. This is my mentor. I was very guided by him when I was in my 20s. He was in his 80s, but then he taught me to go deep into understanding purpose. So he used to say, livelihood for a living, but living for what purpose? In Hindi, he said, जीवनीय जीवन के लिए, जीवन किसके लिए? What are you living for? The question needs to be, reflected upon, and we chose some of these for reflection in our meetings, with professionals. Why am I doing this project? The whole idea of asking ourselves deep questions about why, not just how, but also why. Next, please. From the Greek civilization, all of you have heard of Socrates, but have you heard about Socrates' statement where he says that an unexamined life is not worth living? Again, it's all about the same thing. If we have not examined the purpose of what we are doing, why we are doing, then according to him, it's not worth living. Why are you doing what you are doing? So this is the key thought process in many civilizations, even the Chinese civilization. There's another person who's very thought-provoking in this context. His name is Francis of Assisi. Many of you must have heard of him. He was an Italian saint, but then his life background and the way he evolved his ideas is beautiful. And in our courses in conscious living, we refer to all these people about how they evolved their ideas and how they are beneficial to us professionals in daily living. Next slide, please. So these are the steps in living, the conscious living. And one of the steps is conscious self-control. We are sharing this in all our training programs. What is the meaning of conscious self-control? It comes again way back to in India. There was a person called Patanjali. He lived about 3,500 years before, and he wrote this book on yoga. So he's also called the father of yoga. And yoga, one of the steps is cleansing, which leads to self-control. Now, what is this cleansing about? It's about understanding our biases. It's about understanding our prejudices. It's understanding about our preconceived notions, our arrogance, our envy, greed, jealousy. We are all full of this. And when all full of this, with all this garbage in our minds, how can we think of meaningful transformation? How can we actually even think of such a meaningful transformation? So it is important that we cleanse ourselves before we start to try, make connections with people. Because if connections will be genuine, only if we remove all our biases and prejudices. And we are all full of them, all of us. There's a systematic method through which these can be, cleansed. It's a slow process, but we need to start on that journey. If we don't start, we are stuck. Even when we are old, we are still stuck with those all those garbage that we have picked up in our minds. So there's one of the steps, and we share this in our course on conscious living, and it leads to beautiful results. Next slide, please. In the village context, the method is different. We evolved a method of conscious self-control among the villagers, and the issues there are of a different nature. For example, in rural India, the issues are about a large proportion of men coming drunk at home in the evening and leading to domestic violence. So there's need for a different approach altogether. Here we evolved, there was innovation needed. The innovation is needed at every stage. So we administer vows there collectively in front of the whole village. We administer vows, and people come together, they take water in the hands, and then they take a vow. And that is usually a very serious vow. It leads to very useful end results. People are able to give up their habits which they don't like. So, but there's we need to innovate at every stage. What are we trying to achieve, and how can we do it together with people? Next slide. This is again, we have to remind people, and you all know that we make so many mistakes with our spoken language. Little thing goes off and we are talking nonsense. How often we speak, and there's so much of misunderstanding. We are critical and judgmental of others so often. We keep blaming others. We are using harsh language. Study the language when we are excited, challenged, criticized. So can we have more control? Can there be more conscious speech? And it is possible as we move towards calm minds, as we move towards systematic steps towards self-control. It also leads to conscious speech. And all these things are something, they are not theoretical. They can be put into practice. And it can be done not by lectures, but through a reflective process. Reflection action is the key to change. Next slide, please. Conscious buying, the huge phenomena in today's world. It's leading to problems of climate change. It is leading, the whole idea of, when I connect to the youth here, they all talk about impulsive buying. They just go to the market and they just start buying things left and right. And they all understand that this is not really needed. They're just buying because there's a trend to buy. And our television shows, all our big celebrities are constantly telling us to buy. Now, there's a need for a process in which we are having some control over a buying idea. What are we buying? Why are we buying? And it's very often just about a trend. And most young people have said that they were really stupid at buying things. And we need to take this narrative out everywhere. This whole idea of buying meaninglessly needs to be checked. And then there's often the greed for more. We start comparing with others. That fellow has a better bike. I don't have that kind of bike. That has a better mobile. I mean, all stupid. And all kinds of wasteful expenditures which are not really needed. It's a good idea to have discussion on this, and it needs to huge changes. And simple lifestyle doesn't mean that one becomes a Gandhi. It just means being conscious about what we do, what we eat, what we wear, and everything. Next step, please. This is a big subject, again, very enjoyable. I give assignments on conscious relationships of getting to parents, their relationship with friends and parents. We have a very short time here, but then this has brought one of the most amazing results of how we improve our relationships through better understanding. And maybe this is not the right time, but I really enjoy working on this or sharing ideas of how to build conscious relationships. Next, please. In the rural context, again, the whole idea of building consciousness is also through a means which we have been practicing for last 30 years. It's about sitting together and collective singing of prayers. It leads to very good results. And we chose a prayer long back, which was very joyful in singing. It had very meaningful words, and it became so popular that it has spread to millions in North India. And we are quite proud to say that we started, the idea of prayers. We started training people in how to sing their prayers together so that it sounds good to everyone. It suits their mind. And so when they come to a meeting, they might have fought with their husbands or whatever, but when they come to a meeting after singing a prayer, the whole atmosphere becomes very positive. So the collective reflection, collective consciousness is very important to be able to take collective decisions. Next slide, please. I am just sharing very quickly the impact. This has led to impact on thousands of people, but here are some reflections. These are people in the government. These are reflections by people in the government. Now, mind you, government means bureaucracy. People are not accustomed to think about their own lives. But here you can see what they are saying. I have never thought about myself. It is true that my earlier notions were based on an arrogance that whatever I am doing is right. Not anymore. I realize that I know so little. Similarly, these are just very selective examples. There are hundreds of people who go through this process of conscious, sharing, and they, the perspectives on life, on work procedures, that it makes very meaningful, substantial changes. Next slide, please. These are international students. So look at what Renata has to say. This course has made me think about myself, how I act, how I talk, and my actions. From now on, it will be important for me to be real, sincere, real, and truthful to my values and my beliefs. And I'm going to stand up for what I believe in. We are so happy to see such a response coming from youth. And it is so fundamental for anyone, whether in business, whether in social change, whether in politics, anywhere. It's very important that a person connects to one's own self deeply. And as we are saying, it is possible to do that through, short courses. They must be not, must not be kind of lecturing. It has to be based on reflection, a reflective process. Next, please. So this is again James from Kenya. And after a course, he says that life is more than just earning an income and raising a family. Those reflections were fundamental in reinforcing the power of self-consciousness and inner peace. Similarly, the student who came from Norway, saying about making right decisions. One must have a clear mind, and to be able to control it, you have to work on it. These are fundamental to human evolution, to human, let us say, joy. And unless we create an atmosphere where we reflect on them collectively, we can never hope to get these ideas come from, I don't know, existing atmosphere that we have in our countries, where people just go to the pub and drink off at night and they think that they're very happy. Next, please. For me also, my journey started by reflection about my own life purpose. After, studying at an elite college of engineering in India, it's called the IIT and the IIM, I abandoned my life in the corporate world, basically by reflecting on purpose. What am I trying to achieve from my life? And that is what led me to resign. So this is my, I'm just in my 20s, together with my wife and a young daughter. In my 20s, I had abandoned the life and I started living in a village. This is a photograph from about 35 years back. The whole idea, therefore, is that whenever we are trying to, wherever we are, we must ask ourselves, what are we trying to achieve? What is the purpose? And once we try and do that, it leads to so many changes in our own lives. Next, please. I just picked up this statement from Werner Heisenberg, and it's a beautiful statement. He says that it is probably true, quite generally, that in the history of human thinking, the most fruitful developments frequently take place at those points where two different lines of thought meet. No? So two different lines of thought are meeting here. The whole systems idea of transforming, the whole consciousness idea. As he says, these lines may have their roots in quite different parts of human culture, in different times, or different traditions. Hence, if they actually meet, if they are at least so much related to each other that a real interaction can take place, then one may hope that new interesting developments may follow. And we all have to move and try and understand that making these two lines meet is so fundamental to evolution, so fundamental to uh, mankind's prosperity and peace. We can't just do them by, it can't be done by governments alone. We, as civil society, as members who are concerned citizens, we have to take the lead. Okay, next slide, please. Now, this is the part that I hope to spend a little time on how we can move forward. Those were just the ideas that we have evolved and worked on for last almost 3 decades. And now, can we? Now the question is, and we all of us can participate. We can again meet later on. These conscious living concepts, as we have found, even the youth are giving amazing responses. It's all about a framework of conduct in daily life. Can we have chapters where people are sharing these ideas and maybe adopting or at least endorsing the ideas and trying to move in that direction? And can we have these chapters in different cities? Each chapter should have some mentor, somebody who can explain. So that person can have a short course. And we can connect in these chapters not only ordinary citizens, but there can be youth, people who are interested in trying to do any kind of transformation. So we have experimented with such chapters in Lucknow and somewhere in Delhi, and it seems that somebody has to take the initiative, somebody has to take the training and the mentorship, which is not a big deal. It's just maybe even online training of these consciousness living methods. So one idea is that, can we think of local chapters? The second thing is about capacity building. Capacity building is not something one is lecturing. It's about enabling people to think through deeply, through reflection, through sharing of experience. So it is experiential learning and reflection. Can we have these? We are quite happy to take the lead in creating more mentors who can do then conduct this exercise at their own level. But then it could be both online. Residential is the best, but if residential is not possible, this capacity building can be done online, and we found that to be quite effective. Even online methods we found quite effective. These could be for citizens, for students, but especially for mentors who are going to then connect to the others. The third way forward is, we still need to channelize donations and charity which are going in the wrong direction very often. Can we channelize donations and charity so that it connects to those who are in the field facilitating change, working among disadvantaged, using the methods of empowerment and conscious living? First, we have to train them, and then we have to support them. Support them means giving them some stipend so that they can actually go forward and take those ideas to people who need them. If we are still going by the traditional social work norms, I believe that we are doing injustice, because we are not reaching the core. We are not making the transformation. We are simply doing some polishing, which is not sustainable. You can give your thoughts. Finally, we need to connect to higher education institutions. We need to start degree, diploma, certificate courses on the subject. We have already started, and we find that it has a huge impact. But all this needs a systematic approach. Some people, maybe corporate world, some Bill Gates to sponsor it. Maybe not just here, in different places, so that people get to know what is happening. There's no point in reinventing the wheel. When there's something has been done, it needs to be shared. So these are some ideas.